Hey, everybody, and welcome to We've Got Issues. It is our privilege to come to you regularly to discuss topics that we feel are important in our own personal lives, in our personal chat thread that we have with some friends of ours who have all been friends for more than 40 years. We like to fancy ourselves as being somewhat engaged in what's going on, but really wanting to kind of go deeper and think about how we can offer solutions and open up conversation that you too in your life may be thinking about and want to respond and have an open conversation about. My name is Nick Cates, realtor and investor here in Los Angeles. And this time I'll let my co-hosts and whatnot introduce themselves, starting with Darin Gray.
Darin G. I am from Detroit, as you can always see, and living here in the City of Angels, well, just outside the City of Angels. And I am a former engineer, if there's ever such thing, and an educator.
Yes, sir.
And I'm Ron Evans, born, raised, educated in Los Angeles. Been working in technology all my career, and nerd, and living in the DMV area, the DC suburbs, and that's who I am.
That's it. That's it. And very powerful thinkers, one and all. Nerds on a certain level, but kind of also interested in pop culture and all kinds of subject matter and stuff. So what our hope is to just have a fruitful conversation that will hopefully engage and give you food for thought as we're moving through the world in which we live. And each week, each one of us will take a topic and we'll discuss it. And today, Darin is up to bat, and he's going to tell us what's on his mind this week. Darin, take it away, brother.
Well, what's on my mind this week is the Siren Song. Mm-hmm. And my response, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So over the last couple of years, I've noticed that younger women are drawn to me, like flirty and really trying to engage. Now, mind you, it wasn't like this my whole life. It wasn't until Wesley Snipes came along. And you see in the show notes one of my favorite lines. And you also see in the show notes a link to a picture of me from back in the day that Ron Evans shared recently. And so after Wesley, I started, moving up in terms of the rankings, where women were like, and as I've gotten older, it seems like more and more young women in particular are interested. I was at the dentist, and the hygienist was, locking eyes with me 2 feet from my face. And I'm like, I was so uncomfortable. I had to close my eyes. I was like, you can't be a soft-spoken, asking me all sorts of things while staring me in my eye that close, because I was uncomfortable. And then another one, I went back to the same dentist, a different hygienist, very chatty and everything. She starts singing while she's cleaning my teeth, singing, smoking, be with you, be with so uncomfortable walking down the street, women like blowing their horns and waving. And I'm like looking around, seeing, they know somebody. And, it's just something that's just changed over time. So since, going back to to Odysseus, since I can't plug my ears with beeswax, the only thing I can do is tie myself to the mast. And the mast is just God asking, deliver, lead me not into temptation, deliver me from evil. Because, I am, I didn't grow up like Mr. Fine Ron here with women throwing themselves at. So I never had that experience. I never developed a defense mechanism against, like how do you fend off the hordes of women? I've never been able to do that. But Ron, he's always been that way. So it's just something that's just a struggle. And one of my, one of our buddies was talking about, the same thing happens at his job. It's eerie and uncomfortable. And I was sharing with my wife, it's like, I have no female friends, other than, the folks that are in our group. And I only see them when we get together. I have no female friends. And I used to have a lot of female friends. I have none. And I'm not Mike Pence, like I'll never be alone with a woman or anything. But I've been at my job for 28 years, and I don't have any friends from my job. You know, I've got coworkers and colleagues, but nobody I would consider friends. I think my most recent friend addition was maybe when I was in the military, like 13 years ago. I don't really add friends, but definitely no female friends at all, just because I don't know how to handle this. So that was my thought. You know, I shared it with with the guys. It's just something new, new retrospectively, but you know, definitely something that I and struggle with on a regular basis now. I've had it.
Let's say that we have no corroborating witnesses to say that what you are saying is actually true. And when you see that picture, if you look in the show notes, that we'll put in there that picture of Darin from back in the day. Now, back then, when he had his solid gold body and his, rippling biceps and his lean, fast twitch muscle fibers and whatnot, it may have made more sense. But I have no way of knowing how true these statements are that you're speaking of. Dang.
Wow. I don't have any stories like Darin's. We have a mutual friend in Los Angeles, and when I came out to LA maybe 2 years ago, I was talking to her and we were out having drinks, and she said, "Ron, once a woman turns 40, she becomes invisible." I'm like, "No." And she's like, no, yeah. Men only see women in their 20s and 30s. Women over 40 become invisible. We're not desired anymore. We're not viewed as attractive. They always say ma'am to us, and can you move out of the way because I'm looking at that cute little girl. And I thought about that. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that she probably is right. Well, first of all, she is right because it's her reality. And I also think that it applies to men of a certain age. I think that at a certain age, we also become invisible. So I am surprised by Darin's what happened to him, because I view at a certain age, we're invisible. And I don't know, Nick, if you feel the same way, but I think once you hit 50, I mean, will women see, and we do have a friend in Dallas that I wish he was on the show because I would love to get his point of view. Mm. But I feel that at a certain age, they may see, oh, wow, you drive a nice car, you appear to have money in your wallet, but they're not looking at how attractive you are. They're looking at, are you a mate that can, that can survive, the apocalypse, and do you have money? So I don't see it. I guess I just don't see it. Maybe I need to go to your dentist. I don't know.
You got the self-esteem dentist over here. When the older man's self-esteem dentist, it's more than a teeth cleaning, right? Morality boost, right?
But in these situations, like I drive a Toyota, and 6 years old. I don't by any means. No, I'm usually in shirt and tie. I must admit that I'm always in shirt and tie when I'm out and about, except for on the weekend. So when I'm out about, I work on a college campus. When I'm out about, I'm always in a shirt and tie. Usually suspenders, and so I have a certain look. But it's going to lunch, it's going to the food establishment. It's just something I just noticed. And even when I'm with my wife, sometimes she'll be like, "Wow, do you see her checking you out?" And I'm like, "No." But, it just seems to be, something that has happened in my old age. And again, it's not something I'm accustomed to because, my impressionable age is you talk about being invisible. Back in the day, brothers of a certain hue were invisible.
Yeah. I got to say that I think that there's a lot of truth, Ron, to what you were saying about how men see women after they reach a certain age. I think that our society valorizes youth, particularly as it relates to women. the magazines, the television shows, everything, even in the age of the Real Housewives and so forth, where I think it is a little bit that like that threshold of where women become quote unquote invisible has been broadened a little bit. But even that is based on how you can hold yourself together through plastic surgery or through whatever. So
Yep.
it's always the pursuit of youth that's there. But as it relates to how women see men, I think there's much more latitude in terms of age that women might find a man attractive, because to your point, Ron, I think women are looking for something a little bit different, even if it's like just primally, not necessarily consciously, but from a primal perspective than what men are looking for women. Men might look at women from a reproductive, a primal reproductive standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So after they reach a certain age, just primally, they're not necessarily reproductive, attractive from that standpoint. And that translates into the youthful look and all that. But women, are looking maybe more primally for protection, for security, for provision, all those kinds of things, right? So if you're signaling those kinds of things at different ages, whether it's from the youngest age, where I think developmentally, probably men and women in their younger days are looking for the same things, physical attraction, right? Women are looking for men who are physically attractive, men are doing the same. As women who I feel are they're much more at a disadvantage, from a mating standpoint than men are, right? Because men, particularly in more recent years, have been less interested in connecting monogamously and all that, and as opposed to having multiple mates and multiple whatever, not as interested in getting married. I know even myself, back when I was in my 20s and 30s, it was going to be very difficult for someone to get me to commit to a marriage situation, which is why I only got married for the first time in my late 30s. But yeah, I think men have much more. So to Darin's experience, I think that it doesn't sound unreasonable at all to think that if you're projecting a certain level of ability to have status or provide or whatever, women might be more interested in that.
Yeah. Nick, I think that's a good point, but I also think there's another type of woman that we need to make sure we recognize, and that is the fact that more women are going to college now than men, and they are handling their business and getting careers. My older daughter is one of those where she's made moves, and it's going to raise the bar for a mate. And I think that in the workforce and the dating scene, if you're 30, 40, 50-year-old woman and you've been making it on your own, it's like, okay, I'm here. Where are you? And our buddy in Dallas told us a story about how he met a woman that she was going to be a partner in a law firm. And she just straight up said, here's how much I make. How much do you make? Let's just get this out the way right now. Whether are we on the same level or am I wasting my time? Let's not even bother. So I think there's another type of woman who is the successful one that says, you know what? I got to find the right man, and if we're not equally yoked, I'm not going to bother with you.
Yeah.
But coming back to Darin, I guess I'm projecting a beta, man. I gotta go talk to my wife.
Yeah, you got to come up with the alpha spell. But but to your point, I think now that I think about it, all of the attention I've gotten have been from women in professions, dental hygienists, folks at work, and so they may be looking for someone in the economic pool that ain't someone who is someone of their ability and their mindset. So that might be it as well, where if I come across a certain way, you know, the way I talk, the way I walk, the way I speak, the way I interact, like, wow, you know, he's somebody who could, you know, I can, you know, grow with and something. And it's just odd to me, you know, because it wasn't like that in my youth.
You know, I there's another thing I wonder. On the count of 3, let's hold up our left hand to the camera. 1, 2, 3.
But Darin's not wearing his.
Oh yeah, when I lost all that weight, it flew off. And so
let's unpack this. So you're not wearing a wedding ring to the dental hygienist's office.
And how does one's wife feel about that?
Well, she's the one who she's got to get it resized. But you know,
can we get a special guest from Darin's house right now to join us?
But
Darin's wife.
Yeah, Darin.
But it's been going on. You know, I didn't lose the weight until last year, and so it was on before that, and it was happening then when I'm with her. The weight it didn't come off until late November because of all the weight loss, and so yeah, that's part of it.
So now you're a successful man who doesn't have any indication that he's married, and you're surprised at the attention you're getting.
When I was single, I wouldn't get no attention. Back in the picture of that guy, he wasn't getting no play. And he had already graduated, was working at Hughes Aircraft, had a nice car with the Ferrari kit. Nada.
With the Ferrari kit?
The Probe. I don't know if you remember my black car, the Probe, with the tail and the air dam. It had the Ferrari kit, shiny black car. Yeah, man. I had my own business. I had it all, and I was
flexing, major
flexing,
not getting no love.
No, because I got my car.
But Darin, you got. You know, let's be honest. You got married early. You know what I mean? You got married pretty soon, right after college. Yeah.
A couple of years, yeah. So it wasn't like you were out there. I mean, maybe in your teens. I think maybe from the age of puberty until the last year of college, and then the couple of years after that, it was slim pickings, man. Slim pickings.
Nick, what about you, man? Can you relate to Darin? I mean, I know you've got the missus probably in the house, but you know, you could cough. Just cough if you agree, or blink twice.
Right. Yeah, I don't think my situation has changed much over the years. I think that you know, there's always been those little flashes of this or that. Someone may, you know, show an interest or whatever the case may be, but it's not like, you know, it's not like of epidemic proportions. It's not like I'm having to beat anything off or whatever. I think the real issue is more one of, you know, just understanding how to position myself in doing what I do so that I'm, you know, I'm always, you know, not distracted by, you know, by things that could distract you, you know, because I think my hygienist, for example, is, you know, I don't think there's any real threat, you know, when it comes to that. So yeah, it's, you know, and Darin, you mentioned about not having, you know, female friends. I don't feel any need to particularly get close to women as friends, at least that aren't already friends of mine. So it's not like, you know, that there's a need for that. But I don't feel also at the same time that I need to remove myself from having any kind of friendships with women.
I'll give you context for that. You know, for those who don't know, which is most of our audience out there, my wife and I were married, divorced, and then we remarried. When we were married the first time, I had a lot of female friends, a lot. And, you know, I think that none of them and everything. And she was always just, you know, weary around them. When we got divorced, a number of my female friends expressed interest in being something other than friends, which shocked me, just shocked me. I was floored because, you know, for somebody who'd been in the friend zone for so many years, I didn't think you could cross that boundary ever. Yeah, I thought that was just like, the brain blood barrier boundary where you just never go from one side to the other. And so it was my cousin who pointed out that to me. And one of the things that she said, because, during that time that my wife and I were divorced, the only woman I really spent time with was my cousin. And she said, unless they are blood related, you don't need to be spending any time with any woman, because their interest in you can change based on things in their lives, and you won't even know it until you're halfway down the aisle. And so from that point, I was like, all right. So I had to let a lot of my female friends go because, I couldn't trust the relationship anymore. And I had no idea, I mean, none, that they were interested, like zero idea. And so I realized I don't have a defense against that. I have no defense. And these were some of the same friends that, I'd ask for advice about women, dealing with my wife. They were in the inner circle. They knew, what was going on with me and my wife. And, they'd be giving me advice. And I'm like, I don't know if they were giving me advice, from a friendship or, as a challenger to the queen, So after that, I was like, you know what, unless they are old, been around longer than my wife, they can't be in the club. And I've got some work folks that we're cool with. Every once in a while we'll go out to a couple's lunch or something like that. But there's definitely we're not having no friendships, none, zero.
So it's interesting because there's our good friend, and she's the ASU grad. And I always get scared when my wife is around her, and then they're best of friends, because I'm always afraid of any of you that knew me before I knew my wife.
Trojan family secrets.
Woo, Lordy. Because it's like, wow. And I think what the blessing is that there's 3, 4 of the ladies that we've been all friends. When Nick says it's a group of friends for 40 years, that's male and female.
Yeah.
And we got some OG friends that there's just nothing but love. And maybe it's because I feel satisfied by my collection of female friends that I don't even see another woman trying to push up on me or be a friend with me, because I'm like, I got that box checked already.
Right.
I honestly do not see it. And after the show, I'm going to ask my wife, does she ever see it? Because I don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you could categorize these in the category of good problems if they happen. I mean, just to know that you're, you still have some value out there is, if nothing else, is just kind of a.
Well, my value is, during the apocalypse, am I going to be food or am I going to be a leader? That's my value.
Right. Darin, the king of apocalypto.
Yes.
He's always the end times prepper, of the group. So
you're doing more homework and preparation than any of the rest of us.
I hear you. So,
and we know your battle plan for when you come across a village and they have water. So we know what your move is.
Yeah.
So, right. Well, if you guys out there and listening to this little conversation, should you be male or female, and have some thoughts about the dynamics of the man as the male gets older and as women get older, and what the experience is on either side, or your own particular experience, we'd love to hear about that, because I think on one hand there's probably some universal truths, and on the other hand it's very much individual, and I'm sure we all have thoughts about that. So Darin, thank you for bringing us that enlightening conversation that we all have gotten something from. But I think you've got a good interesting parting shot before we get out of here on today's episode as well.
Yeah. This morning I'm watching which one was it? This Week. and they talked about Stephen A. Smith running for president, and they actually interviewed him, and he is considering it. Before he used to say, that there was no chance, but now he's saying that he's open to, running for president, and he's got some interesting takes. The thing that one of our buddies absolutely hates him, and I've never been a big fan. But the thing that I always liked about him was, his ability to mix it up. He can actually have those, toe-to-toe conversations as well as be an intellectual. And there's not a lot of people that can do that, particularly those on the left. They tend to get into the more of the personal name calling and, and demonizing, as opposed to being able to engage with somebody, essentially, playing the dozens, but playing the dozens with real topics. And so I just found it intriguing that even if I don't think he could secure the nomination, but he would definitely shake up the primary so that all of the folks on the left, with their gentlewomanly nature of being afraid to mix it up because they want to rise to a higher plane, I think he would definitely bring some dirt. Essentially the way the folks on the right do it, they go attack dog. And you need an attack dog. If they got a dog, you got to have a dog too, And I think in the chat, the Democrats have to get away from when they go low, we go high, to when they go low, we stomp on them. You need to be able to fight. You need to be able to mix it up, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for somebody who's going to fight for them. And so that was just something cool, I thought.
Yeah. Ron, I'm sure you got some thoughts about that.
You out your damn mind. That he is objectionable. He is a showman that is measured and intelligent when he wants to be, but then he's reminded that every 30 seconds he has to be bombastic, because that's what his overlords want, and that's what he does. His showmanship might appease a certain segment of the sports audience. I do not see that translating into discussing economic policy, immigration policy, national defense. He's a carnival barker for sports. Let him stay on ESPN, and when his contract expires, hopefully he will fade away into the netherworld.
Right. Replace the word sports with real estate, and you're talking about our president, right? Bombastic. It's the same guy.
I agree.
It's the same guy. And if that guy can get elected, then this guy can get elected.
So what you're really saying is, we just want to win. We don't care how deep into the bottom of the barrel we go to find a candidate, as long as we win. We will put our morality and our soul on the shelf to make sure that we win.
Well,
are we no better now than the opposition?
Well, the problem is, when you don't win, then you have no say. You don't control any of the houses of Congress, the executive, or the judicial. So not winning is worse than winning with that guy, because not winning, you can't, like the Democrats have no say. They can't do anything to stop what is going on in the administration. And I'm not an anti-Republican. I didn't vote for the president in any of the 3 times. But I also can see that when you're in power, you win. You can set trade policy that goes against the Constitution if you have the courts on your side. So not winning is not an option if you want to be able to affect your policies. You can stand on the moral high ground on the sidelines all you want. You can be us, at the Coliseum yelling down, run the ball. But if you're not on the sideline, or if your guy's not on the sideline, you're just shouting in the wind.
I'll tell you what, Stephen A., has said himself that he's not a Democrat or a Republican. He's an independent. Now, that creates its own challenge to becoming president, should he decide to run. But I certainly agree with Darin that you replace realtor, real estate mogul with sports analyst. And it could be the same thing, the same appeal that makes people. And I don't think that Stephen A. has come up with this on his own. I think people have looked at his persona and have said, wow, you're the kind of guy who could break through the noise because of your unique position where you're fully willing to criticize the president and fully willing to criticize Democrats for whatever. My concern is that I don't think he is and I honestly, I don't think he would ever really run anyway. He's making way too much money doing what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly,
so was Trump, right?
I don't know. Trump was. I don't know that the motivations that led Trump to want to be president are the same motivations that would lead someone like Stephen A. I don't know that Donald Trump was actually literally a billionaire before he ran for president. He said he was.
He's making
millions.
Said
he was.
Yeah, he said he was. Now,
exactly.
I'm sure he certainly had means, but I think I think his initial impetus was that by running for president and making a strong bid, even if I lose, my brand can only be successful, which will make me more money. But then when he got into the game, he realized, if he didn't realize initially, that when you have all the levers of power, now, even while you're president, not afterwards, not when you have run your course and then you go back into private life and then you use your status as being an ex-president to rake in enormous amounts of money, you can start doing that while you're there. Mm-hmm. And so I think his interest in being president for many, many years, even before 2016, have always been, self-centered. It wasn't about making things better. It was about what's in it for me, right? I don't know that Stephen A. Smith has lived decades or however long thinking, yeah, I'd like to be president. I think as he's ascended in his notoriety and so forth, and people have come to him and said, hey, you're the kind of guy, your ability to communicate is something that would be profitable should you decide to do that, has now opened up a portal for him to consider it. But I don't think that his interest in actually solving the problems that he's willing to criticize would make him willing or to take on what it takes to actually run for president. So
I think it'd be very similar to the way it happened for Trump. Nobody thought he would win. He didn't even think he was going to win. Right. I think that Stephen A. could be in that position as well. And the thing is, the Democrats are in need of somebody like him who's willing to call balls and strikes, someone who is willing to, have the hard conversations, have the loud conversations, and, not, like somebody who's willing to strike back. This dude, wasn't afraid to back down from LeBron James. It's somebody who's willing to go toe to toe with the powers that be, and be okay with that. I think that's the type of person that Democrats need to field because the world has changed. Yeah. And I think that he may not be the candidate, but I'm fairly confident that someone has to come out. The current leaders in the Democratic Party are what did Ron say? The beta males, they're not appealing. And one thing that Gavin Newsom has been really on his listening tour, he's trying to figure out what is motivating these young men to support the president, even when his actions are counter to their interests. And he's trying to figure out, it's like, dude, you're a Gen Z with student loan debt. Why are you supporting this dude? And the part of it is this way in which that strong leadership thing comes from. And I think that's something that the Democrats don't have. And they see it as toxic masculinity. And I think that has caused them to go in the other direction.
I can't argue with that. I'm going to make this quick point, Ryan, then I'll, turn it to you. But I think, and I said this in a previous episode, I wholly believe that somebody and somebodies need to step up sooner rather than later. Stop being cute about what your intentions are. Like, actually say, listen, I see what's happening in the world. I see where our country is going. I see the damage that can be done when someone who does not have the interest of the country, but their own interest in mind, like has the reins of power. I want to be the person to set this thing right, to actually move forward. Like, don't be cute about it. So whether Stephen A. or Gavin Newsom or anyone else, I believe like waiting for 2022 and all that is a mistake. I think you need to take the alpha role and say, hey, I'm really thinking, at least say I'm thinking about this, because I can't in good conscience sit back and see what we're doing and not try to be part of the solution. Go ahead, Ron.
I'm just really sad. I'm really sad by the whole conversation. The fact that with 300 million people, the best we can do is a stupid game show, reality show guy. And now we're talking about a guy that hosts a terrible morning sports program. I just did a quick search. Since the 1950s, Germany has had 7 chancellors. 6 of the 7 held at least a law degree or a PhD. Angela Merkel had a PhD in quantum chemistry. That's what that country produces in terms of leadership. And we're here debating whether a guy that hosts First Take should lead our democracy. And it just is really an indictment on where we've fallen as a country. And it's just really sad.
But even our former leaders, you go back, we have military leaders, it sort of started to change, post Nixon. That's when it really started to change the face of politics, where you had, Jimmy Carter, who was a peanut farmer governor. I mean, it sort of changed after Nixon, where we were trying to get away from the strong man. The country didn't have an appetite for, the traditional leaderships. I think it just is the sign of who we are as a people. And, we need to embrace it. And, without throwing the Europeans under the bus, well, actually I am, it's real easy to be selective and picky when you got your big brother standing behind you, flexing your muscles, saying, yeah. So as long as the United States and NATO was behind them, yeah, they can take certain liberties and luxuries with, I've got a well-thoughtful president. They didn't need a wartime leader because they didn't have to worry about, the red Soviet machine because the United States. So when
What are you talking about? The Soviet Union was literally on the German border.
Yeah, it was. And the reason why they were able to not have to worry was because of us. They weren't going to stop the Soviet Union. It was us. And so it's like Canada, it's all these European countries. They get to be who they are because they have the big, mighty United States ready to back them up. So you don't have to have a wartime leader.
So you could have a functioning democracy where you elect the best person because you're not the United States.
Because you don't have to spend so much of your money on defense. You don't have to constantly be the world's policeman when all you have to do is spend 1% of your GDP on your military. Yeah, you can afford to do healthcare, education,
we
all that
spend
stuff.
More on the military than the next 6 countries combined.
Because we're defending them.
No, because we have a military industrial complex and we can't get off the Habitrail wheel.
Okay, but why are all of them like, oh no, don't leave NATO, don't leave NATO, don't leave NATO?
Because they found a dummy who is protecting them with our tax dollars and they don't have to.
Exactly, that's my point. That's my point. Because they had their big brother standing behind them with all its might, flexing, saying, don't bother my little brother. They can focus on higher order things and giving, 50, people talk about, in Europe, they get all these days off. That's because the American taxpayer is working like a dog to support the military. Like, pull us out of NATO and see how
my head explode.
If we pulled out of NATO and they had to fend for themselves, I'll bet you their success would not be the same.
Can I just jump in here one quick second, Ron? Because this is the same ideology that leads people to say, yeah, America's getting ripped off. Yeah, America's paying too much. Yeah, America's being played like a chump. What country What country in the last 50 years has succeeded economically, socially, and in every other metric that you can claim than the United States, even though, to your point, we spend more on military, we spend less on social services, and we do all this kind of stuff? Those countries economically would trade places with us in a second, even coming out of COVID, even over the last year, because the way they've structured their economies and so forth does not generate the kind of wealth that allows their citizens to be able to do the kinds of things that we can do.
And there's the trap that you just fell into, and that's the problem with our country. We define success criteria as wealth. If we look and say, who has created more billionaires? We have Google, we have Facebook, we have Amazon. Aren't we exceptional? That doesn't help normal people. That just helps the wealthy. If you look at wealth, sure, that's one way of looking at it. How about rating us in terms of the world populations and countries that have the best healthcare, the best education, okay, the lowest mortality rate? Let's not look at dollars as if that is the holy grail of what makes a country exceptional. How about how they treat their people, how they protect their people, how they house their people? This is what Europe does. And there's this naughty, naughty word that drives the right crazy, and it's called socialism. Okay. And what they do is they make sure that everyone can participate in the benefits of a country. And we don't do that here. And that doesn't make us exceptional. It makes us mercenaries.
And again, you can do all that if you are spending 4% of your GDP on your defense because somebody else is spending a lot more. If we weren't defending them, they would have to invest in their own military. You got this much money, right? If you aren't spending that much money on facing the critical threats from Russia, if you aren't doing that, then you get to spend money on healthcare. You look at what happened when the Soviet Union fell, right? We had what was called the peace dividend under Clinton, and that's where we got all those budget surpluses because we had the peace dividends. We weren't spending as much money. You know, the United States military posture used to be we are able to fight two wars simultaneously, two world wars simultaneously. After the Soviet Union fell, we collapsed that to hold off one enemy while we fight one war. And we had the peace dividend, which was what Clinton used to balance the budget. If you don't have to spend money on defense, you can do a lot of stuff.
We are spending Japan, more than the next 6 countries in the world.
Because we're defending so many of them. We're defending all of Europe. We're defending North Korea. We're defending...
No, that includes China. That includes Russia as well. Okay? That includes all of the countries in the world stacked. We're spending more than Russia, China, and the next 4 combined.
Because we have to defend against them.
Okay, what?
We have to defend. We're defending Taiwan. We're defending Japan. We're defending Korea. We're defending all of Europe. We're defending Australia. We are in all of these places with our military, and we are projecting power, but we're also running up these huge deficits.
That's right.
Because of that, if we pull back, if we brought all of our troops home, we would have a peace dividend. If we were like, you know what, the rest of y'all, we out. We wouldn't have this problem. And they would not be who they are because then they would have to spend it. You think if we pulled out of NATO, all of those countries would not reinvest their money into defense?
Of course they would.
And where would all their healthcare, all that education, their numbers would plummet just like ours do?
No, you don't know that. That's
you only got so many dollars.
No, that's sorry, but you don't know, because what you're really saying is their culture would change based on increasing their defense budget, and you can't make that correlation.
Well, it's either that or they'd be speaking Russian.
No, Darin, I mean, I need you to go turn off Fox News, man, because you've got like a double dose of it right now. Darin, we have over 5,000 nuclear warheads. How many do we need, Darin, for you to feel secure?
We need a defense shield. I'm not going back to Star Wars.
No. But your argument is that, you know what? If we back off on our defense spending, the world's going to be at risk. We already have 5,000 nuclear missiles.
But we're not launching.
We have more aircraft carriers than anybody else in the world.
But we're not. If the Russian tanks roll into Poland, we're not using nuclear warheads.
Bruh, the Russian tanks rolled into the Ukraine and they're getting blown up by a couple $100 drones.
That's because we are supplying the military. We're supplying hardware. How many hundreds of billions?
Amazon and Best Buy are supplying the drones.
No,
okay, this is like
no,
this is commercial drones.
Okay? But that's only working when you have the HIMARS keeping the Russian.
You're fighting a war with cavalry and horses, Darin. Times have changed. Okay.
Listen, guys. This is a subject that should have probably been your A block, and not your general.
Not like Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, we've gotten way over our skis on that.
Yeah, I think we have.
So we're gonna have to leave it there and let the viewers and the listeners chime in because, as usual, I believe that somewhere in the middle is where it really is. Do we need to spend all the money we spend on NATO? Probably not. Can they spend more? Probably so. Can we do better societally with how we treat our citizens and so forth? Absolutely. Like all those things can be true at once. So Stephen A., if you want to solve that problem, get after it, brother. So, that's where we are. We want to know where you guys are on the subject. This is a rich conversation and worthy of hearing from you. So we'll leave it there and we'll come back. I'm sure though this topic will raise its head in future episodes, but appreciate you guys always. Ron, what's your parting shot here, Ron?
Was this supposed to be the light part of the show?
It was Stephen A. Smith.
Hey.
Man,
yeah. He laid a booby trap for us on that one. He buried the lead of this episode. So I hope people stuck around through the male female thing to listen to the controversial last stanza. So anyway, we're gonna let you guys get out of here. Please like and subscribe and follow us on YouTube. And we'll be back with more discussions about the things that hopefully will be resonating with you, Ron, Darin. Always a pleasure. We'll catch you and all of you guys on the next episode. We'll see you next time.